Hi class, this is Dr. DiBiase, and I am taking you behind the scenes, as it were, so that I can talk about how to do recordings of your projects. If you're looking to do sort of a traditional conference presentation, and you are thinking about how you might record audio over your slides, how you would record the slides, how you might include an image of yourself or a video of yourself as part of that presentation. I'm going to take you through the steps that I use in order to do that and put together a video, and we'll see how this goes. So what I have open right now is a software program called Open Broadcast Studio. And the reason why you see this sort of cascading pile of me's is because right now I have it set to display capture, and you can see that down here. And that means that because I am recording, you can see that down here, right? It says start, right now it says stop recording because this recording is going. If I wasn't recording, it would say start recording. So because the recording is going, it's capturing literally everything that shows up on my desktop. So let me show you how you, I'll show you a little bit about the program and why I use it, and then I'll run through a couple of different ways you can go about doing this kind of project. So let's pull up Chrome, and to find OBS, you just type in OBS Studio and you can Google it. It's going to be the first hit. And I'm actually going to remove my image just for a minute. So that you can see everything on the screen just in case. So the nice thing about OBS is it's free. It is open source. It's maintained by a community of software people. I am not one of them. I have no idea what that would involve, but I do like the system. It's also useful if you are part of the discourse community of video game players. It's a very, very common software program used for those who want to stream their gaming on Twitch. So just putting that out there. The other nice thing about OBS is that it works on pretty much every operating system. As you can see here, you can use it for Windows or Mac, OS 10, 10.13. I don't imagine that anyone here is using Linux. The exception here, if you use a Chromebook, those do run on Linux, but I do not know for sure how well OBS runs off of a Chromebook. That is the one hiccup here, and would require you to do a little bit more digging. But if you are using a Mac or a PC, then this is a really good and free solution. So once you download the program, and if you click on download, they'll give you your options for what you want to download. You'll get the installer. It's incredibly easy to configure. How do I know this? Because I was able to do it, which means it must be pretty easy, because I am not the most technologically advanced person, as much as I like to pretend to be. So when you open up OBS, you'll have options for what you want to capture. And again, the nice thing about OBS is that you can capture everything on your desktop. So if you're in presenter mode, whether that's in Prezi or whether that's in PowerPoint or whether that is in Google Slides, it's just going to record everything that you do on the screen. If it's on the screen, it will show up in the recording. In terms of, I'll put the camera back on for a second here. So to add things to capture, you use this little sources window, and it gives you a whole bunch of options. So what I use primarily is display capture. It captures everything on my screen, and I have audio capture. So what's interesting here is my computer has for whatever reason on my particular PC, when the mic is on or when the camera is on, it's picking up the mic. But you can check your audio. So you see here it has mic auxiliary. I'll show you. I don't use the default mic when I can avoid it. I've got a snowball mic here because the quality is better. But the mic that you have for your computers, I'm sure it's fine. I wouldn't worry too much about it. You can configure all of that in the audio mixer. Some of the options to keep in mind here is, for example, if you have a presentation and the presentation has its own audio, then you want to make sure that you are also capturing your desktop audio. I have that muted because I have ruined at least one video for class because I did not realize I had a YouTube video playing in the background or one of my daughter's videos playing in the background. So I like to mute the desktop audio unless I absolutely need it. And for whatever reason, I have an issue on this particular machine where the video capture device, which is my my webcam, built into the laptop, also picks up audio. And so if I don't mute that, I actually get an echo because I get two different sources of audio. So you always want to make sure if you are using OBS to do your videos that you only have one audio source coming in, capturing your voice, and then possibly you might want desktop audio if your presentation has some sort of audio component to it that you want to record. This is actually also really important if you're ever recording like a conversation that you're having over Zoom and you're not using the Zoom record function for some reason, but you're using a program like this. You want to get that audio as well, or you won't get the person who's speaking to you won't pick up the audio. Okay, so that's sort of the basics in OBS. So what I basically do if I'm making a video for class, once I've got it set up, I've got my my window here. And again, when if you do video capture device, you can configure it. You can adjust the size, the location of where you would show up in the finished video. I like to sort of tuck myself in a corner. Once you've got your display capture and then I guess your optional video capture, if you want to be on camera, you don't have to be. If you do, we'll talk about what that means in your presentation in a little bit, but if you didn't want it, it's easy enough. You just never add a video capture device, or if you add it and decide you don't want it, you can mute it by clicking on that little eyeball, and there you go, you disappear. I'll bring myself back for a moment. All these other settings you can essentially ignore. Like for the purposes of just recording your desktop, that's all you need to do is basically set it up, add the display capture option, make sure that your display is firmly set in the middle of this display window, and that will be the default. Let's see. There we go. Lock it in. There we go. Takes a little finagling, but that should do. So you're essentially capturing your whole desktop. There we go. Synced up. Again, you can adjust the size of any sort of other windows that you're including. So if I want to do a PowerPoint, right, and if I want to record a PowerPoint, I'll get my PowerPoint slides. Let's pull up. This is just the discourse recap slide. And the one thing that you have to keep in mind, and actually I'm glad that it pulled up this particular this slide. So if you look carefully at the video from this lecture, the discourse recap part 2, I screw something up here because I have the video window of me up in the right. For this one slide, I did not account for that, and so when we go to present, and you can see that slide all the way at the end, right? The upper right corner is blocked off, so you don't actually see the in a vacuum portion. But what you'll notice if I back up, for the most part, even this one's a little tight. For the most part, barring these last couple of slides, right, where I let the fancy design get away from me, you can see here, right, that I've intentionally left the space up in the top right corner of my screen blank. And in fact, here the default was to have the graphic actually centered on the screen, and I was paying attention enough to move that down as just a precaution. But everywhere else you'll see that I've tried to do my best to keep that upper corner clean. And what I'll frequently do, and I'll get out of this for a second, is I will frequently run a test. So I will start recording and just go through all of the slides very quickly in present mode and then play it back for myself so that I can see whether or not there's anything cut off, and I can adjust accordingly. And that's probably the only way that you can ensure that you're not going to have anything cut off. When the video is done, right after I've gone through and given my entire lecture and I feel comfortable with what I've had to say, I hit stop recording. I'm not going to do that right now, obviously, because we're going to lose the video. But once I have done that, what it will do is it will save the file as a .mkv format file, which is functionally useless for anything. So you can't upload those to YouTube. If you have a Windows PC, you can't use the video editor that comes with Windows 10 with that file format, so you need to convert the file, and in OBS it's called remuxing. I think they're just trying to be clever. But if you click Remux Recordings, you'll be able to browse your files, and if you choose any file, and it doesn't really matter what, I'll pull one from earlier this week. Right, here's some MKV files from earlier this week. Some are mine, some are my wife's, I'm not sure which. I'll pick this one, but you'll click open. You'll click Remux. It already exists because we probably already did this, but that's fine, we'll redo it. And what happens is, if you now go to show recordings, and you go down, what you will find is that, and I'll try and expand this out so you can see a little bit better. What you'll find is that you'll have the MKV version of the file, and then right below it you will have the converted file, which is an MP4, and that's really what you want, because once you have an MP4 file, there's a lot more you can do with it. You can upload it to YouTube, being like the #1 big thing that you can do with it, but also most video editing software, whether it's something default like iMovie, or whether it is the video editor that is in Windows 10, you can use the MP4 file formats. The MKV does almost nothing for you at all other than record the initial video. Now, you can use essentially the same process with Google Slides. So if I go to Drive, start a new presentation, just make it a little test presentation. Make this fancy. And we're just going to copy a bunch of these slides. So again, if I was doing this, fresh recording, I would open up OBS. Like a nice little desktop icon. Right, looks like this. So I've got OBS opened up. I would click Start Recording. I would open up my my Google Slides presentation, click on Present. And again, the first time I would do this, I would make sure that I had done a test drive where I'd be recording while I just quickly flip through all my slides to make sure if I'm using an image of myself, I'm not cutting it off, cutting anything important off. Again, it doesn't really matter if you're not using an image of yourself, if you're not including a video component, it's irrelevant. You don't have to worry about the design element in that case. But if you are going to use the video of yourself, you do want to keep that in mind. So again, much like we did with PowerPoint, we can just run through our slides, and OBS is recording literally everything that shows up on your desktop. And then when you're done with the video, right, if you run through your presentation, you would just go through, click Stop Recording, and then use the Remux option to convert it to an MP4, and then you can do any subsequent editing that you need to do. So that's essentially that. And the same thing goes with, I'm not going to go into Prezi right now, but again, essentially the same thing. If you've built your presentation in Prezi, then you can, again, just set up OBS, click Start Recording, do your presentation, stop recording, and then go through and convert the file to an MP4, and you're good to go. The one thing that I usually do, the only real touch-ups I do on my own videos for class are usually just trim the beginning and the end where I'm actually going into OBS and exiting OBS. And that's more for aesthetic reasons than anything else. You don't necessarily have to do that. It just makes it look a little bit more professional to start the video at the actual beginning and not show all the setup. And to do that, I use just the basic video editor in Windows 10. If you have any experience with iMovie, I suspect it's probably even easier or more intuitive. I don't particularly care for this editing suite, and yet I use it because it is what I've got to work with. So you would title the video. And I'm going to remove my image from this part of the video just so that we can see the whole thing. So I would go in my videos, pull up an MP4. Let's grab, say this one. I don't know which one this is, but it's short, so we'll roll with it. Okay, so this is part of the discourse lecture. And if I needed to trim it, I would drag it down to the storyboard, click on it, click trim. And I would want to get rid of this part. You're not going to hear any of the audio because, again, I've got desktop audio as not being recorded at the moment. Although it might get picked up on the microphone here.
Let's turn now to discourse communities, right?
So I'm going to stop it there. These two tabs here let you determine where it starts and stops. So I'm going to trim it there. Double check to make sure it starts where I want it to start.
Let's turn now to discourse communities.
Well, that's an awkward, that's not awkward watching myself. Okay, we'll go to the end. I want to clean up that part, especially because this video is the middle of some other videos I was going to be doing or putting together. Okay, so we'll see when it ends. That looks pretty good. And then we just test it to make sure that.
My personal sort of what I'm interested in thinking about.
Boom, perfect. Click done. It's trimmed. You finish the video, export it. If you have the option, export at the highest possible resolution. That way your slides look nice and clean when people are watching them. We're not going to go through that process right now, but essentially this would export it to your video folder, and then you could upload that to YouTube. I will note YouTube has its own editing software suite. I am not super familiar with using it because most of the stuff that I'm doing is super basic. I'm at most trimming off the beginning and end of a video or putting together two separate recordings. There are a couple of other ways that you can go about recording your stuff. So PowerPoint has an option. If you go to PowerPoint, we'll go back to the beginning of this presentation. And let's see where we're looking. Transitions, slideshow. Okay. So there's an option here that is basically to record the slideshow, and you can use narration. So if I click record the slideshow, it pulls up the slide, pulls up my my slideshow, and I can hit record and work my way through the slideshow. And I can even like mark it up as I'm going along, which is kind of cool, right? So I'm going slide by slide here. I haven't hit record yet, but you can basically record it. And if you do that, you can actually like record slide by slide. Like you could click record, talk through your slide, stop the recording, go to the next slide and do it again. And then essentially what that's going to do is create a file that when someone opens it up, they will be able to hear all of your audio along with your presentation. And in fact, if you look down here, there's even a camera option. It's not going to let me do that right now because I'm using it for OBS. But if you were just doing this straight up, you could click this camera and you could get your video on there as well. There are some pros to doing it this way. It's all sort of integrated, and that is a nice feature. Plus, because it allows you to record slide by slide, uh, you can really kind of take your time and make sure you get every slide exactly the way that you want it. The downside is that the files are enormous. They can be very, very large when you do it this way. And they also, and this is not something you necessarily have to care about because you're not trying to post this stuff publicly in the same way that I have to. But they do not play especially well in other on like smartphones and smaller screens and stuff like that. So there are some real downsides to doing that. For me, I try to be cognizant of the fact that I don't know what kind of device my audience is going to be looking at, and so I try to use YouTube because I think it's just incredibly accessible. Also, one thing I like about YouTube from an accessibility standpoint is that it creates it will do closed captioning for you. The captions aren't always perfect, but it will do them. I think PowerPoint has that option, but I have never really tried it, and so I don't want to make any promises there. But this is an option that you can use, and we'll just get out of this now. I think we just hit this X here. I want to show you one other option. So again, if you're doing this in PowerPoint, you would click on the slideshow option, click record slideshow, and then you could go and record either the whole thing straight through or slide by slide. But again, it does make for a large file. The one reason you might want to do this is if you don't want to screw around with OBS, or if you're working from home and like your parents like, I don't want you adding extra software onto our computer or whatever, then use this. But I assure you, it's a safe program. If it wasn't, I wouldn't have it on my PCs because I have ruined a fair share of computers by downloading gaming software without running it by other people in the family. So I am especially cautious about that. So OBS is a solid program. There should be no issues or concerns with it. I'm going to show you one other option. So there's no real good way to do what we're doing in PowerPoint in slides right now. It's just not that kind of a program. But there are some things that you can do. So one thing you can do in slides as an alternative to recording the audio the way you might with OBS or the way you might with PowerPoint is you can insert audio. So if you go to insert and click on audio, is this what we want to do? Actually, let me back up a second. Tools. Now let's see what we're doing here. So this is to insert actual audio, but we don't want to do that. We want to record. Now this is a good reason why you want to rehearse your stuff before you record it, but you're sort of stuck with me here, so I'm not going to sweat it too much. It's possible that the issue here is that my microphone is running on another program, so I can't be sure that that's not the problem. Let's try this. I suspect, because I did get this to work yesterday, that the issue is that this microphone is currently engaged on another program. Actually, let's fiddle with that for a second. Yeah, I think that that's our fundamental issue here, that it's not going to allow me to record. I'll test this after the fact and follow up with you guys just to make sure. But it is possible to insert audio in Google Slides, and you can either record that separately. So like you could record the audio on like your slide by slide on your phone using the voice memo option, and then insert that, use that file and insert that audio on each slide. I've had students do that before. That's perfectly viable if you're going to be using slides. But I think the smoothest way to do it is to use OBS, if we're being honest. I think that covers most of the main things that you need to be aware of. Once you have, depending on the way that you've done it, so if you're doing it in PowerPoint by using its, its built-in record function, then you would just upload that file. If you're using slides and you're just inserting audio, then you would just, share that particular, slide presentation with someone. If you're doing it with OBS, then what you would probably do is either share the MP4 that you would have after the conversion or after you're trimming or editing, or you could upload it to YouTube, and that way you just have a link to the actual presentation. I don't necessarily have a preference for how you go about doing that, but you can approach it a couple of different ways. The most important thing here to remember is that you want to rehearse your presentation, regardless of which format you do. You want to rehearse your presentation several times before you record it. You also want to try and take a deep breath and not get frustrated if you screw things up. I screw things up constantly when I'm recording these videos. I usually start or stop 3, 4, 5 times because either I cough in the middle of something or my kid comes into the room, which is why I'm recording this now, as you can see, at 11:40 p.m. because everyone is finally asleep. So for various reasons, you may have to find yourself starting and stopping, and you can either do that one or two ways. You can just sort of pause in your recording and then proceed, or you could stop the recording and then start a new one, and then piece together those pieces of video, which in the Microsoft video editor, it's really easy. You just sort of select all the files and drop them into the storyboard, and then you can trim as you need to just clean up anything in between. I have not used iMovie or whatever the current Mac software is, so you probably want to go to YouTube and look up a tutorial there if you need to. But my understanding is that it is also relatively intuitive. So I'm going to wrap up now. I can see that we're pushing half an hour, so thanks for sticking around. But if you're going to use the sort of traditional conference presentation option, then I hope that this information was useful in terms of thinking through how you might put that recording together. If you still have questions, check in with me either via email or during office hours. I can even use the share screen function through Zoom to do that. And actually, there's the other option. So let me talk to you about Zoom for a moment. I'm glad I remembered that. Now you get to stick around for a few more minutes. All right, let me open up Zoom for a second, because Zoom has some features that they're useful. They offer you another way to do things. Logging in. So I'm just going to go into the room that we use for office hours. Yep, I want to open Zoom meetings. Okay, you cannot see the camera right now because the camera is engaged by OBS. So ignore that for a moment. But what you'll see at the bottom, right, is you've got share screen and record, and those are the two things we care about here. So first we're going to click share screen, and I will just share, let's say, PowerPoint. Actually, we'll do this. Let's go back to PowerPoint for a moment. Use my lecture. Start the presentation, and I'm going to tab back to Zoom. And I'm now we're going to get out of that and redo it. Share screen. I'm going to select the slideshow. Click share. And you'll see that it says I'm sharing. Now what I want to do is, let's see if I can find it. Here we go. So under more, you can tell I don't use this option a whole lot. Oh, good Lord. All right. There we go. Under more, you see the option to record. So I can either record this to the cloud or record on my computer. If I click record to the cloud, when the recording is done, you will be sent a link, and that link will just take you straight to the recording. So if you can do your recording in one shot, that actually works out really well. You don't have to worry about any storage space on your machine. If you want to record to your computer, then you click record to your computer. And what's going to happen is, I'll click record real quick, and hopefully my computer doesn't explode, is now in theory recording my presentation. I'll go back to my PowerPoint slides, and I can go through all of that, and then back under here, we can stop our recording. I'm going to stop the screen share. I'm going to get out of Zoom. And if I go, yep, it's converting my files, that's good. So it has converted my file. I can get out of Zoom, get out of this presentation, and now it actually automatically opens up the folder. And if we click on this folder, this Zoom 0, this is downside. The file is not great. What's kind of cool is you get a file with just the audio. So if you're going to do an audio project, you can just use the audio. I have no idea what the playback does. Playback just might be the video without anything else. I don't know what this does actually. Apparently it doesn't do anything. Alright, get rid of that. But here you go. So if you click on the actual file, Zoom 0. Now that the computer doesn't explode, is now in theory recording my presentation. You'll see that it's got the whole presentation up here. It should show me kind of flipping through it hopefully in a second. Let's see. And there we go. So what I would say, as I'm sort of wrapping this up here, if you do not intend to do any major editing, Zoom is a really good way of doing this. So you just click record, you click screen share, you choose the thing you're going to be sharing. And if you're doing PowerPoint or Prezi or slides, you really want to make sure that you open that up first, right? Open that up, get the slideshow ready to go, then go into Zoom, click record, click click screen share, have it share your stuff. Actually, in retrospect, you're better off doing the share screen first and then click record. That way, you cut out any sort of fluff in the beginning, and if you can go kind of straight through, then that's a really easy way of doing things without having to download any additional software. Because I often make edits and clean stuff up, I prefer OBS, but again, that's just me. So now I believe that covers all the possible options that you would need to talk about. Good luck with your recording. Hope everyone has a good night. Take care.